Committee of the Whole is called back to order, but the people of Guam, please be advised we will stay at recess until we meet a quorum. Thank you. So we're still in recess. The Committee of the Whole is called to order. Colleagues, we are still entertaining the amendment introduced by the Speaker, which is line 2 to 9, page 9. All right, folks, I hope that's that should be the correct page, right, Madam Speaker? And if I think we left with you, or it was Senator Clint? I don't know, but I know that it was Senator Clint was Senator Tello. Okay, Senator Tello. Right? Okay, well, let's regroup this one more time. Let me ask. It was Senator Rigel. Senator Clint, you still have the floor, or you have the floor right now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we had a chance to talk about this with Gita and get some more clarification. So first of all, just to clarify, the 5% would not come out of it wouldn't be an amount appropriated from the general fund. What they're talking about here, or what they're attempting to achieve here with this language, is to get 5% would come out of the 35 million that's being appropriated in this bill. Out of the 35 million, it breaks down. Part of it goes towards paying for base rental, principal and interest. Part of it would go towards paying additional rentals. And then out of the additional rental fees, 5% of that. So, number one, the money would not come from the general fund. It would come out of the 35 million that's already, it wouldn't be a separate appropriation. It would come out of the money that's appropriated in this bill, the 35 million. The 5% comes out of that 35 million. It's not even 5% of the total 35 million. It would be 5% of what the annual additional rental fees are. So because of that, in looking at the language, I do think there's problems with the way it's written. So I actually do have an amendment to this amendment that I'd like to proffer that I think should clear up a lot of the confusion and ensure that the language is accurate and to ensure that it does what it's supposed to do.
That being said, I'd ask my colleagues if they could.
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else like to speak other than before we go to the amendment? He's going to proffer amendment. Senator Blas?
Oh, okay.
You want to wait for the amendment first to?
Yeah, no, I think we got to take care of the amendment first because how do you amend a deleted section?
I beg your pardon?
How do you amend a deletion?
How do you amend the what?
I can show it. Actually, it just amends the deletion. It adds in language above where the deleted section is. Sorry, where the deleted lines are.
Why don't we hear why don't we have the amendment presented, and then we can move from there. Folks, my colleagues, if you pull up, it has been already uploaded. It's line 25 on the page 8.
Yeah, it would be line 25, page 8.
Stand by, because we had to make a correction on her page, and maybe it should be actually reflect. It's somewhere on page 9, line 2 to 9. Quick recess so we can make sure we get that corrected, because we may be conflicting like we did yesterday. Thank you. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Senator Clint, we left off of you.
Yes, so after the advice from legal, I'll hold off on proffering my amendment. Legal recommends it's better to proceed with the speaker's amendment first. It's just cleaner that way, so I'll
We'll move on.
hold off on my amendment to her amendment and instead offer it as a standalone amendment after we dispense with her amendment.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else like to speak to Speaker's amendment? Speaker, do you want to close on your amendment, or?
Yes. Just want to thank my colleagues for the discussion on this. Again, so this amendment is to delete the language that would have, in this bill, appropriated 5% of the total cost of the contract to GIDA. And so, again, 5% of the total contract we might be looking at 5% of 600 million or 5% of 700 million, 30 million over the life, or 30 million today. That's why it wasn't clear. Or even if over the life of the contract, that's over $1 million a year. GIDA's fees for all other bonds, the most I could find, the highest one was $363,000 for a GWA bond. That's an annual fee to GIDA. And GIDA's entire annual budget is $3 million. And so I think if we're going to appropriate money to GIDA, that, we can require them to come with, further down after the charrette is done, maybe with, to show us all of the federal funds that they have consolidated for this building of the hospital and how they are going to be allocated and why none of that is available for GIDA's needs, what they might need right now. But I do commend that GIDA actually is already perfectly involved in the project, and that the governor is seeking the $3 million from the Department of Interior for the Army Corps of Engineer. We might be getting $345 million if the congressional amount comes through. We might also be getting funds from the infrastructure bill if that bill goes through Congress. And so I'm just saying there's a lot of, hopefully, federal money that we might be able to use that we do not have to do through a leaseback, especially, preliminary costs or fees to GIDA. And if they can be taken care of in any other way, then that will be less expensive because we won't be paying financing charges or interest on those leaseback payments. So I'm hoping they're going to come back with a more accurate plan. And Mr. Chair, so yeah, I would ask my colleagues for their support and to delete that language from this bill.
All right. My colleagues, you've heard the amendment proffered by Madam Speaker. Do I have are there any objection to the amendment proffered? We have an objection.
There's an objection.
All in favor? Please, all in favor. There is an objection. All in favor,
Mr. Chair,
please raise.
I thought
Yes.
the objection was withdrawn.
No.
Oh,
No, the amendment was put on hold, his amendment. But there is an objection, okay? I asked if there's an objection. I saw a hand, so let's move on that. All in favor of the amendment proffered by Speaker Terlai, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Amendment passes.
Thank you, colleagues.
Okay, Madam Speaker, you have another one?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair.
And that's in line 10, page 9, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
This section of the bill talks about financing a feasibility study for the existing GMH building. As you know, we need to use that building for 5 to 7 more years. And as a hospital, it will be used for the next 5 to 7 years as a hospital. After that, this feasibility study is supposed to determine whether it can be used for any other government purpose. However, my amendment is to delete from this section that requires a feasibility study, the $1 million appropriation. First of all, I don't think we need to do a $1 million appropriation today for a feasibility study of a building that will not be available for 5 to 7 more years. And I don't, frankly, want to add a $1 million obligation on our general fund after we just passed the FY22 budget, which allocated every dollar of the general fund that we were predicting to bring in as revenue. So I think this is, this makes our budget unbalanced if we pass this today, and that's one reason, but really the main reason is maybe they will find another way to fund this feasibility study without the grants and the federal money that they are receiving. Again, this is all through GIDA. Or we will wait until, we see that it's more feasible to do a feasibility study closer to the time when that building is going to be available, because the condition of the building, if it is deteriorating, will be very relevant to its use. So that's why I'm proposing to to delete the words, the appropriation to GIDA $1 million from the general fund. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone would like to speak to the amendment? Senator Tello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I stand in support of this, and the reason why, Mr. Chair, is because in the 35th Guam Legislature, when I introduced legislation to create a hospital task force, I also worked with GIDA to recognize funding for this task force, and they were granted it through the SIDS program and incorporated. Since that time, Melanie had said they had been granted that funding, and it was over $1 million of that money. It was brought up when we were talking with the task force during our meetings, that this money was achieved, and they have it in their hand at this time, over $1 million in grant money from GIDA that they were able to receive. So it's not like they don't have the money for this study, and in fact, Mr. Chair, if you ask GIDA what the funding is for and what it can be used for, this is a prime example of what it could be used for. So I asked, the senators to recognize that they do have this money. They had a grant. It's been awarded to GIDA, and ask for the support for this amendment, because there's no need to dip into the general fund right now. We've appropriated during our budget, we've appropriated every penny that we had going in there, with basically under the cloud of not knowing what our financial condition is going to be and where we're going to fall short. So we have to keep that in mind and utilize whatever grants we get. And this is one area that received funding for this. If you want to take some time to call, Mel, and ask her if they received this money, she'll tell you they have, because I was told several times and I brought it up. So they do have this funding. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Since you're asking me if I want to call Mel, I would have no problem then calling Mel. We'll recess now. Call Mel.
No objection, Mr. Chair.
Committee of the Whole is called back to order. We settled the issue with the Gita. Does anyone like to speak to the amendment of Speaker Terlai? What was that? We'll have Senator Tello because she asked me to call. I called. I had her listen to exactly what they
Thank you, Mr.
answered.
Chair.
Thank you.
I did speak to Tina and found out there's actually some additional funding from federal grant that was provided to Gita for a study for the healthcare, which was broader. But Tina is now talking with Mel to find out how much, particularly the amount was received from that other grant from the SIDS that was incorporated into their report. So we're waiting for that. Oh, it's there? Okay, great.
They're going to call you because they want to give you additional information as you're
Okay.
speaking. So,
Thank you. Okay.
and you know what, folks? It was on our chat. We're going to recess and come back at 1 o'clock. Only because you only got a few more minutes, and then you need to get somewhere, Speaker. So I'm waiting for Senator Tello if she can resolve this real quick, so we can at least vote on this amendment. And then my colleagues, I'm looking at, we're going to come back at 1 o'clock, try to finish off 121, and then we can move on and do 153 later this afternoon. So, Senator Tello.
Mr. Chair, Tina, if you hold on one sec. I have Tina on the line right now, and they said they did receive $1.7 million from that, and they've taken some funding out to accommodate for some other stuff. How much did you take out, Tina?
So we can go ahead and move on with this amendment, and then we can settle this, okay? As soon as she turns over her
Okay,
mic.
so they
good.
only took out 500 million for a portion of 500,000, a portion of the 1.7 million that they received. 500,000 was taken out for some other study, but the remaining is still there, Mr. Chair. So they
All right.
do have the funding. Thank you.
So we'll just proceed on. Does anyone have an objection to this amendment? Yes, Madam Speaker. Yes, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question for the sponsor, if we could just talk about this a little bit more.
Yes.
The $1 million that we're removing is from the general fund. Is this what we already appropriated in our budget bill, or is this, is there a way that you foresee them capturing this money?
Madam Speaker, do you yield to that question from Senator Nelson?
Well, that's the reason I'm proffering the amendment, is because if we're saying it's from the general fund, we haven't increased the revenues in the general fund, so and we've expropriated all of the general fund money that we are anticipating. So no, I do not know how they would capture any other additional general fund monies.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Are there any objection to the amendment proffered by the Speaker? There being none, amendment passes. It is 10:30. We will recess until, that was your amendment. It passed. And we'll come back at 1 o'clock. And we'll try to finish off Bill 121. We have I'm really hesitating to count the number of amendments, but there's probably 3 or 4. And hopefully later this afternoon, we will start with the DOC bill. All right? So with that note, we are recessed until 1 o'clock.